To kick off today's program, may I now invite the Secretary General of the University's Grants Committee, Dr. Richard Armour, to give us a few opening remarks and a presentation on the roles of the UGC. Dr. Armour, please.
Good evening, everyone. Professor Benjamin Wah, panel chairs, council and panel members, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Richard Armour. I'm the Secretary General of the University Grants Committee. It gives me great pleasure to welcome everyone to this town hall meeting called Submission of Individual Grant Proposals. Today we're delighted to have invited Professor Wah, Chairman of the RGC and the panel chairman, to brief us on the role of RGC in providing research support to the UGC sector and other major issues concerning the work of the RGC. We also have later a sharing session by past awardees of the General Research Fund, the Early Careers Scheme, to share with us their experience in preparing good proposals. Then after that, we shall have a Q&A session which we'll welcome your questions and comments and sharing. In the following presentations, I'd like to let you know a little bit more about the work of the UGC, especially its involvement in the provision of research support to the institutions. But before that, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the role of UGC in the research funding domain in general. We've realised lately, this last few months, that there are some quite profound misunderstandings about the respective roles of the UGC and the RGC. So Ben will handle the RGC part in his talk later, but I'd like to spend a few minutes telling you about what UGC does in its general job, but in particular concentrating on UGC's role in the, as I said, in the research funding domain. So, my talk, the roles of the University Grants Committee. This is the diagram that my UGC chairman loves to show to everybody. The four cornerstone principles that the UGC believes in. Most of the four cornerstone you'll understand: academic freedom, institutional autonomy, public accountability and value for money. Those are the four principles that UGC strives to achieve. And the other dimension is the policy-driven initiatives given to us by government. I think they're fairly familiar principles, but that's UGC's main job, and we try to do that. That's our role as the buffer body between our client institutions and the government. What does institutional autonomy mean? It means our universities are allowed and protected in devising their own curricula, maintaining their academic standards, in the hiring and firing of staff, and selection of students, in carrying out their own research into whichever academic discipline and domain they choose to do, and to handling their own resource allocation, which adds up, in our view, to substantial freedom. The UGC's job is to try and protect those issues, and to maintain the fact that the institutions are set up under their own ordinances and not under the UGC control. Terms of reference are fairly simple: to keep under review in the light of the community's needs for publicly funded universities and institutions, their facilities, plans for development and financial needs, and to advise the government, as you see there, on the application of funds for education and the aspects of higher education which the Chief Executive may refer to the UGC. Those terms of reference have been in place largely for the last 50 years. The structure is fairly simple. The original committee at the apex of the triangle, the University Grants Committee, the sister bodies, the Research Grants Council, which is semi-autonomous, and latterly the Quality Assurance Council. But under the UGC, there are standing subcommittees to deal with issues such as strategy, research policy matters, various other things, and then ad hoc groups on the right-hand side, like academic development proposals, institutions, financial affairs, and the like. And I'll talk to you a little more, in a little more detail about the research policy matters next. UGC members, the membership. Members are appointed by the Chief Executive in their personal capacity. This is a very important rule in UGC. No member is appointed as a representative or a delegate. There are local and non-local members, lay members, as well as academics. As of last August, the matrix, there are 6 local academics, 8 non-local academics, and 7 lay members who are, the lay members are distinguished community leaders, professionals, not representing, but they cover business, the professions, schools, public service, and the like. The non-local members are distinguished university leaders from across the world, from the mainland, from the US, from UK, from Australia, etc. They're open in giving their independent advice with reference to international standards and practice. And each UGC member is appointed into different groups and subcommittees according to their capability, interest, and the UGC's needs. Characteristics of UGC funding, you probably know this, it's a triennial funding model, and to enable the universities to have some predictability and stability in resources. The block grants are given in a 3-year arrangement to try and provide maximum flexibility to the institutions. Just so you know the quantum in recurrent grants in the most recent year, which was a rollover year, was 17 billion, and plus about 9 billion recurrent grants. So the research portion of that was about $4 billion. If you take that on a triennial basis, that is just over $51 billion. As the previous Chief Secretary said to me, not the current one, previous Chief Secretary said to me on my first week in the job as UGC General Secretary, Richard, you have the biggest budget in government. No pressure there then. Let me tell you a little bit about the subcommittee under the UGC advising on research matters. Its terms of reference: to advise the UGC in the strategy to promote research within the sector, formulation of the strategy allocating publicly funded research postgraduate places, and the balance between teaching and research within the funded institutions and the whole sector in general. The members of the research group, as of August last year, 5 local academics and 4 non-local academics. Funding for academic research. The government provides funding to the 8 higher education institutions mainly through the UGC and the Research Grants Council. This constitutes the major source of research funding for the 8 institutions, and together it makes up collectively about 74% of the total research expenditure. The good thing is everyone knows where to come for research expenditure. There's one principal source. The bad thing is there is only one principal source. Now this is the breakdown of the research expenditure of the 8 institutions. As you see, the yellow portion there, 65% comes from the UGC. That is what is called mainly the R portion, the research portion that comes through the block grant. The other portions there are some 16% comes from private funds, and other government funds break up in the red portion there, 8%. The RGC in the blue portion there represents only 9%, because that is the portion that comes through the grants. So the RGC handles the grants, but as you see there, the 65% which comes from in the block grant is by far the largest quantum that comes to the institutions for the purposes of research. So, as I said, there are sometimes some misunderstandings about how much of the research funding is controlled by the RGC. It is only the grant proportion, and it represents only 9%. So, to describe what the yellow portion overseen by UGC, that 65%, covers, it provides the infrastructure the infrastructure directly to institutions, which covers the overheads. It's about $4 billion in the 2015-16 rollover year. That proportion is driven by what we call 2 separate engines. One is based on the results of the recent research assessment exercise, and the other engine is the success in obtaining RGC earmarked research grants. So those twin engines drive that 65% of the research portion. It also provides funding for the RPG Places to Institutions in the Hong Kong PhD Fellowship Scheme. That constitutes about 1.8 billion for the current financial year. So we wanted to take every opportunity to describe the respective roles of the UGC versus the RGC in terms of research funding, which is one of the reasons we're taking this few minutes to do that today. So the Research Endowment Fund, which was the blue portion overseen by RGC, was set up in 2009 with an $18 billion endowment. It's been topped up since with a further $5 billion in 2012-13, of which about $3 billion is designated for the self-financing degree sector. So of that, the $20 billion which covers the UGC-funded sector, the estimated investment income per year is about $1 billion, and it is from that the bulk of the RGC grants derive. So that is where the principal grants money accrues that we're going to talk about later this evening. The beauty of that fund, that endowment fund, is it is in a trust. It doesn't have to be argued for on an annual or triennial basis in the government budget. It's set aside, it's protected. It's, many other jurisdictions would be delighted to have such a setup, that research isn't debated in government on an annual or triennial basis. It's set aside as an endowment and there hopefully forever. That's all I have to say, colleagues. I'll pass the floor back to Pian.